You are listening to the Jboy Show, your number one source for the SEC.
My goal was to run through his soul and grab his heart when I run through his soul.
Kurt, Nate, Coach Staff, those are memories.
I think we've established ourselves as, I think, the premier conference in college football.
Now, the SEC is better at the top. It's better in the middle.
The Southeastern Conference remains the premier conference.
Takes the snap. Looking for the receiver. He's got Lutz Kirkland. Touchdown, Auburn!
Think about it. It's always been the SEC and everybody else trying to catch it.
I think this is probably the best league from a competitive venue standpoint.
They have the most capable teams. You just look at those programs, the way they recruit, how they invest.
Snap to Burrow. 3 steps. Fires. Back corner of the end zone. Over the shoulder catch. Did he hold on? He did. Justin Jefferson. Touchdown, Tiger.
And now, your host, Jboy.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us again on another episode of the Jboy Show. Whether you're watching on our brand new YouTube channel in our state-of-the-art facility here at Melt headquarters in Atlanta, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, doesn't matter. Always trying to bring you guys the best content. Got another great guest today. I'm going to get to in 1 second, but I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up one of our biggest sponsors in betonline.ag. Obviously, football's over. The Super Bowl's over, but don't worry, there's a ton of action. We got March Madness coming on, which in my opinion is the greatest postseason sporting event in the history of the world. A ton of wagers, props, bets. Pick that Cinderella team. Head over to betonline.ag and check them out. We also got Major League Baseball, college baseball, everything going on. So don't worry, there's always something going. And the online casino is open 24/7. So head on over to betonline.ag today and tell them Jboy sent you. But as usual, I try and bring you guys, regardless of what team, conference, doesn't matter, the most quality guests, and be able to take you guys behind the helmet, on the court, whatever sport we're talking about. And we've got a guy that was one of the best kickers to ever play in the SEC, a guy that had a 17-year NFL career. It's an amazing story how he got there. He's also the head golf coach at Sanford, a guy that can go out in the course and use the witchcraft and wizardry any way he wants. And that's Mr. Al Del Greco. Al, I'm so excited to have you joining the show. I know I reached out the other day and really glad you accepted the invite and just ready to talk some ball with you.
Appreciate that, Jake. And let me say first and foremost, I've heard a lot about your efforts and where you've come from and how successful you've become at doing this. And just know that your name is one of those out there that's very good at what you do. So I appreciate you having me.
Man, Al, coming from you with all the stuff you've accomplished, man, that means a lot. And you know how much respect my family has for yours. And for you to say that means a lot. And man, you're about as clutch as they get. So if I can have a percentage that's even close as good as yours when you were kicking on these episodes, then I'll take it every day. But I want to, Al, before we get into the nitty gritty and kind of going in the mindset of a kicker and that routine, obviously I coached special teams for a while and understand how important that position is, how vital and critical that position is, especially when it comes down to game-winning time, game-tying time, regardless if you're trying to win or force it into overtime. But the story on how you got to Auburn, because you're one of the most successful kickers in Auburn history. I think you made like 110 out of 111 PATs. You were absolute cash money when you went out there. Can you talk about just how you got to Auburn and how that worked out?
Yeah, it was basically when you talk about fate and good fortune and kind of the good Lord looking out for you in the right way. When I was in high school, George Portella walked on at Auburn 4 years before me.
Okay.
And basically earned a scholarship, became an all SEC kicker there. And it just happened that at the end of his 4th year, they had a couple guys on campus, but weren't really sure about what was going to happen. And he told them about me. And, you know, back in the dark ages when I was being recruited, they didn't sign kickers out of high school at that point. And I was basically the first one that they ever signed out of high school. It was basically because George told them, look, I mean, this kid can play. He's good at what he does. And, you know, they were recruiting me. And then right around Christmas time, they called me up and said, look, I think we're going to have to use the scholarship on a lineman. We don't have room to do that. And I was just floored at that time. Didn't really have any other options. Didn't know what was going to happen. And that bowl season, there were about 5 games that were won or lost by a made or missed field goal. Wow. And Coach Barfield at that time and that staff said, you know what, we've got to kind of bite the bullet and do this. And I remember George telling them when they called me up and said that it wasn't going to happen. He said, look, you made a mistake when you didn't sign my brother, who was a quarterback that went and played at Kentucky. He said, you're making a bigger mistake if you don't sign this kid. And that to me really said a lot. And right after that, I went up on an official visit and Coach Barfield offered me a scholarship and I was so happy. And Auburn became my home. And we played that first year. Coach Dye came in that next January and kind of changed the program and everything about it and the way that it's viewed, the way that we worked. And I owe him and Coach Barfield both a lot for giving me the opportunity to start there at Auburn.
Yeah, Al, I got to ask you, since obviously scholarships for kickers weren't prevalent at all back then, how many kickers do you think across the country that year actually got a scholarship? Could you have been the only one? Was there a handful? Is there any you know off the top of your head? Because you're right. Back then, it wasn't like it was now where not only are you putting the kicker on scholarship, putting the long snapper on scholarship was good enough as well.
No, I honestly can't answer that. I'm sure there were others. I know Auburn had never done it to that point. They had always been very fortunate to have guys walk on and be a part of their program that way. But I'm sure there were others around the country that were offered scholarship. Yes.
Yeah, and you bring up, that bowl season and seeing those guys lose that game kind of the way they did and the importance of it. And we've only seen that every year, every weekend that you turn on the TV, there's games that are coming down to either a missed kick, maybe a missed extra point. But because I do want to ask you about what Coach Dye did and change in the program. But I want you to talk about what was the first kick you remember at Auburn? And I'm sure it's something you go back. Can you just take us there? You're coming off the sideline, whether it's a PAT, whether it's a field goal, kind of what was the moment and what were you feeling going out there?
Well, there's 2 parts to that story. We were playing at TCU, my very first game.
Wow.
And we go out for warm-ups, and of course, I'm jacked and excited and can't wait for the game to start and wondering what's going to happen and how many attempts am I going to get. And they call the team up, and we're getting ready, and Coach Barfield gave his final little talk, and it's time to go out on the field. Somebody had hid my helmet on me.
No.
So I'm spacing out, can't find my helmet, and everybody's telling me relax, and we end up finding it. I don't even remember where it was.
Oh, no.
But my first attempt at Auburn was a 35-yard field goal. And Jake, I promise you, when I went out on the field, I could not breathe. There was no breath going through my through my lungs, and somehow I kicked it. I made it. We ended up winning the game 10-7.
Oh my gosh, Al!
And it was just it was the start. And I think I went the first four games without missing a field goal or a PAT, and then I kind of settled in and threw my misses in there. But that first one I'll never forget. Just couldn't breathe out on the field. Man. It was just so big time at that moment.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And I guarantee you know how it is. You coach after that TCU game, you guys won by 3. I'm sure that next staff meeting, they were like, boys, we may not make the right decision every time, but buddy, did we make the right decision without Greco? But no, and it's something too. And we've all heard it, Al, people, I think kicker is the most underappreciated position in the game because people say, oh, well, you don't got to block him. You don't got to tackle him, buddy. But here's my thing. There's a lot of people on the team that can throw a pass. There's a lot of people on the team that can run fast. There's a lot of people on the team that can tackle, but you can't find 3 guys that can make a 45-yard field goal consistently under that pressure, going through the operations time, having that rapport with the holder and the long snapper and be able to do it consistently, especially in the big moments. So I find that just this very interesting. But can you talk about, Al, just when Coach Dye came in after that first year, because you brought it up, how the program changed, how the culture changed. What's the first thing you remember, whether it's the first meeting that you guys just had, not in front of the media or anything like that? What was the moment where you guys said, or you said, hey, man, I'll go to war for this guy any day?
Yeah, it was probably the first time he came in and we had our first team meeting with him. And, a whole lot of us didn't know a whole lot about him other than, he had played at Georgia and coached under Bear Bryant at Alabama. Knew that he was successful at East Carolina and also at Wyoming, but didn't really, it wasn't like now where you had all this information and people needed background.
There's no Wikipedia page back then.
No. And actually, there had been a rumor that Dan Reeves, who coached the Denver Broncos, was the first choice to come. But I don't know how true that is or where that went. But so I remember, we came back from Christmas break, and they introduced us to Coach Dye. And I mean, it was just, Coach Barfield was he's a good football coach. He was a really nice man, but he wasn't as enforcing as Coach Dye was.
Yeah.
And Coach Dye came in with this look and said, basically, hey guys, if you do what I say, it's going to take a lot of work, but if you do what I say, we will be successful.
Yeah.
And I think from that meeting, he had a lot of guys that really bought into what he was selling. We wanted to win. We wanted to work. And the guys that didn't left. And I know, your dad could have spoke that very much the same way. That was what he was all about. And just, it was just a different work ethic. And that first winter workout, it was at 6 a.m. 3 times a week. And, they had puke buckets on the side, throughout the bubble. And they were used very, a lot. And it was just a different attitude. And I think we found a leader that we believed in, and everybody, to this day, we talk about it when we have kind of reunions or things about, that first winter workout, that first spring practice for so many of those guys that was so physical and so brutal. But it changed their entire way of thinking about what it took to become a champion and to be a winner. And luckily we had a lot of guys at that time that wanted to do that and wanted to put in the work.
Without a doubt. I mean, I used to remember hearing stories about 3-a-days, and my dad used to say all the time he would try and sleep in his tape if it wouldn't cut off all the circulation, just to get an extra 15 minutes, to not have to tape before practice. But Al, I kind of want to go and you talked about that first kick and not being able to breathe, and everybody, when they run out there their first time, regardless of what position you play, it's kind of an aha moment. But talking about the routine of kicking and being able to try and recreate the same thing over and over. And again, knowing your aiming point, whether you're right-footed, left-footed, whether it's right hash, left middle, right middle, which is very rare. But can you just talk about how important it was, or maybe the way you did it? You may have done it different. Obviously you were super successful. What was your kind of routine going out there? Obviously, warming up on the side, following the play, knowing where it is. But did you kind of get into a sequencing of, this is where I want my mind, this is where I want my eyes? I look at the holder, I'm going to give him one nod. I give him the nod. Here comes the ball. Can you kind of take our audience there? Because it has to be that way. It's almost like shooting free throws in my mind.
Yeah, Jake, I think you make a good point in that, much like anything, when you're good at something, it's kind of an innate ability just to be able to focus on the things that really separate you from everyone else. And where kicking is concerned, obviously, and again, I'll go back to George Portella, who taught me how to kick and got me to Auburn. He taught me the importance of your steps. And much like anything, when a defense plays and you're supposed to line up in a particular gap, if you don't, the angle's different. They have a better way to block you. If you're supposed to line up inside a receiver, if you're playing defensive back and he makes an outside release, he can release it. Different things like that. There's a lot of similarities in the steps with kicking. Your plant foot needs to be consistent to the football.
Yes.
So that you can basically have the same leverage, get the same trajectory. And if your steps are off and your plant foot ends up in a different spot every time, the length that your foot or your leg is away from the ball is different, and it's just going to make it inconsistent. I learned that at a young age, which was very, very fortunate for me. I also was very fortunate that you talked about the snapper and the holder, and I had guys that were very good at what they did. Back then, especially in college, you didn't work on that a whole lot. I had Terry Beasley's brother, Jerry Beasley, was my first holder.
Wow.
Pat Sullivan's brother, Joe Sullivan, was my second holder.
Jeez, it's a family affair.
Yeah, it was pretty cool back knowing, what those families were and what they meant to Auburn. Yeah. And then Mike Mann was my holder the last 2 years that I played. So I had guys that made my job a lot easier. And Coach Dye believed in kicking. We worked on it in practice. We spent a lot of time, and I know your dad used to be a critic of the kickers in the kicker field.
I'm shocked, Al. I'm completely shocked to hear that.
But we spent a lot of time over on the field by ourselves, working on our craft while everybody else was banging heads and sweating and getting the crap beat out of them. But, Auburn fortunately has always had just a great kicker. You look at the guys that have gone through there over the years, and for some reason they're able to find the guys that are really, really good at it. And again, they apply the time for them to get their craft done. And they believe and they know the importance of what it's all about.
Matt, I think you hit that point perfectly. And speaking of kicks, I do want to give a shout out to one of our newest sponsors, eBay. If you're looking for old shoes, new shoes, like I said, you want those Jordans, you want those Air Force Ones, whatever, they got them. Go to ebay.com/sneakers. They have an authenticity guarantee. They'll have it on the tag, the logo, the box. They have a whole team dedicated to making sure the sneakers are exactly what you wanted when you hit that order button, regardless of what type of shoe you want, old, new, like I mentioned earlier. So head over to ebay.com/sneakers and tell them Jboy sent you. But Al, we're here with Aldo Greco, one of the greatest kickers in the SEC at Auburn, 17 seasons in the league, and actually kicked 7 field goals, went 6 of 7 against Kentucky, and a number I believe is still a record, I think, unless I'm wrong, Al, which is absolutely incredible. But I want to talk about your time in the league and kind of how you got there, because it's an amazing story. And you spent 17 seasons, played for the Dolphins, the Packers, the Oilers, and the Titans. It's just such an interesting career that you had, and just how consistent you were. Can you talk about the moment where your career really took off?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, basically when you came out of college, you just wanted a chance.
Yeah.
That was when the USFL was around and the Birmingham Stallions were in existence.
Okay.
They had a guy named Jim Miller who was kicked at Miami that was their kicker at the time, and he got hurt. And right before the NFL draft, they called and asked if I wanted to come play for the USFL. And at that time, it was certainly something that was inviting, but I always wanted to had always dreamt of going through the draft.
Yeah.
So I turned that down and went through the draft, sat there, didn't get drafted. Don Shula and the Dolphins called. There were 12 rounds back then, and they called round 11 or 12. Wanted to just talk to me a little bit, and decided they picked another one, and then called me back and said, would I come as a free agent? And of course, growing up in Miami, that was a dream. So I went there. And then, you just wanted a chance to play, and Green Bay called, gave me that opportunity. I went there, made my first, I think, 6 kicks there before I missed. And then, kind of was off and running, went through the player strike of 87 and got replaced by one of the replacement players at that time, and was looking for a job. Then went to the Cardinals, where Gene Stallings was the coach, and kicked for them for 3.5 years. And then finally, got released from there when they moved to Phoenix and got signed by the Oilers. And that basically was where I think my career really blossomed, going in the Astrodome, playing indoors.
Oh yeah.
On a really good football team at that time, really kind of helped me. And I think the lessons I had learned prior to that just made me a better kicker. And I've said along, it was very difficult playing for Coach Stallings. because of the expectations that he had, and just I don't want to say he didn't like kickers, but he expected a whole lot out of them.
Want you to be perfect?
Wanted you to be perfect. Yeah, great way to put it. And I think that made me mentally tougher for the rest of my career. It was difficult when I was there. I don't think I kicked as well as I could have because of that. But I think when I left there, I was more disciplined, more mentally tough than I had ever been before. And I always used to, kind of say that I thought I was one of the best at that. But he made me a mentally tough person, and a mentally tough kicker. And I think that's why my career blossomed the second half, the last 10 years that I played.
Yeah. And again, I mean, you were looked at and still to this day is one of the most successful kickers, obviously, that the Titans, have ever had. And Alice, we kind of wind down here. I want to talk about when you're looking now, you look at the kickers in the NFL and, how consistent most of these guys are. Of course, you got misses and guys that struggle. But I want to ask you, in the league, whether it was at Auburn or in the league, and I know we talked about your first one, what is the kick in your mind that was the best moment for you? The one kick that stands out that you made, maybe it had the most riding on it. Maybe it was in the element. You talk about playing at Lambeau, and I bet it was nice kicking and going from Lambeau to the Dome. I bet that was pretty nice as a kicker as well. But is there one that stands out in your mind?
Yeah, probably so. I mean, any of the game winners were big. There was one in Philadelphia that my fifth field goal of the day was a 51-yarder on the last play of the game in the middle of December when it was freezing cold, and we won 15-13. But looking back, I think Super Bowl 34 when we played the Rams.
Yeah.
I had missed one earlier. I had gotten one blocked from a protection malfunction, and we had a 43-yarder with a little over 2 minutes to go to tie the game, and I knocked it right through the middle. And, that was kind of the kick that you had always practiced as a kid, and put yourself in that situation and dreamt about. And to have that happen and tie the game, the dramatic finish that we had, that Kurt Warner throws the touchdown pass to Isaac Bruce, and then Steve McNair brings us back down, and we get tackled on the 1-yard line on the last play of the game. Didn't make it quite as beautiful as it could have been, but I think having that been in my 16th year, everything that I had worked for, everything that I had done, I'd gotten to the Super Bowl, I had adversity, and to come back and to knock that thing through to tie the football game was probably the one that I remember the most.
Well, you made the one you had to make, and again, and something I think that followed you throughout your career. You talk about making your first handful of kicks at Auburn in the NFL, just the ability to drown out all the noise and be able to come through in the clutch. And Al, this has been fantastic. I, at the end of the day, obviously, we know each other, and you were real close to my father, but what you did in the career that you had, and looking now and being able to make those clutch kicks, I really appreciate you coming on and taking us inside the helmet, because I think people do need to realize how important those guys that shoot the threes are. We all talk about how much fun it is to guys shooting threes in basketball, and they love that. Well, there's some pretty good 3-point shooters on the football field as well. And I know you watched it this day, and I do want to thank you. I know our audience absolutely love the stories and going in detail about a position that I don't think gets enough credit, whether it's in college or in the NFL. And I really do appreciate you joining us.
Jake, I appreciate you having me on. And I want to say this too.
Yes.
Guys in today's day and age that are kicking are so good.
So good.
Not only accuracy wise, but the leg strength that they have, the ability to have kickoffs that go out of the back of the end zone almost, 85% of the time. A 50+ yard field goal is nothing for them to try anymore. That was really a big thought back when I played, because, well, if he misses it, we're giving up field position. And they're so good at what they do today that I think the risk of a miss is nowhere near what it used to be. And I think teams try that more. And hats off to those guys that are playing today. They're worth what they're paid, and they're very, very good at what they do.
Yeah, and they're so good they had to move the extra point back. That's how good they are. But Al, again, thanks so much. And our audience, thank you as usual. Going to keep providing you great content, whether it's on YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe. We're the fastest growing sports podcast in the country. So make sure you check us out. Keep following us. Keep telling everybody about us. We're on Spotify, Apple, everywhere. It's been another edition of the Jboy Show. The Jboy's going, gone. The Jboy Show is produced by David Cohn, technical director Dave Hammock, creative director David Culbertson, audio engineer Feyzan, production assistant Kyle Orr, and our executive producers Crain, Vince Thompson, and of course we film at Melt Sports in Atlanta, GA. So come check us out.